attack of the partisan of justice upon the party of the Ismâ'ilîyeh, and the angry eye upon the party of the Qaramata. Translation 1. The Ismâ'ilîyeh, these are called by 7 appellations. First is the Batiniyah, on account of their profession of the inward sense of the book beside its outward sense, where they say that Al-Quran has an outward and an inward sense, and as for its meaning, that its outward sense appertains to the sciences of language, and that the relation of the inward sense of the outward is like the relation of the pith to the bark. And they say that the laying hold of its outward sense punishes with fatigue and assiduous action, and that its inward sense is an aid to leaving off of action by its outward sense. As respects this, they lay hold of his saying, "Let him be exalted," and so there is established between them a wall, having a gate, the inward part of which, within it is mercy, and the outward part before it is punishment. The Qaramata, because their leader, he who leveled the highway for their doctrine, was a man named Hamdan of Qaramat, which is the only place of its name, namely Qaramat of Waset. The Aramiyah, on account of their desecration of sacred things and allowing of things forbidden. The Sabiyah, because they think the natiqs of the revealed laws, that is, the envoys, are 7, namely Adam and Nuh, and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa and Muhammad. Let the divine benediction and peace be to him. And Muhammad, the Mahdi, the 7th of the natiqs. The S at the end is the wrong plural. And that between each two of the natiqs, there are 7 imams who rely upon the law of the natiq, and there must of necessity be in every age 7 who are imitated, and by whom direction is given in respect to religion, who differ from one another in rank, namely an imam who aids the religion of God, who is Dakameh of arguments in proof of the religion of God, and a hujjah who relieves the imam, sustaining his science, and thereby authenticating him, and though Masa, who imbibes science from the hujjah, that is, receives it from him. These are 3, also certain babs, or da'is, namely an akbar, who is a da'i akbar, who is the 4th among them, who elevates the degrees of believers, and the da'i madun, who receives the engagements, finding inquirers among the people of the outward sense, and causes them to enter into clientship with the imam, and opens to them the gate of science and knowledge, and he is the 5th. And the Mukallab, whose degree in religion is indeed elevated, but who is not licensed in respect to the office of the da'i, whose license, on the contrary, respects argumentation with men, who accordingly argues and renders eager for the da'i, like the hunter, whose degree in religion, like the hunter's dog, until when he has argued with one of the people of the outward sense, and has drawn him off from his doctrine, so that he is averse to it, and inquires after truth. He, the Mukallab, conducts him to the da'i, who is licensed to receive engagements binding him, says Al-Abadi. They call such a person Mukallab only because he is like the ravenous beast who draws off the hunter's dog from the game, according to what he says, agreeing therewith, and ye know not of the ravenous beasts, any which train dogs, and he is the 6th, and a movement, who follows after him, that is pants for the da'i, from whom are received the engagements binding him, and who believes and is thoroughly acquainted with the engagement and enters into clientship with the Imam and acts according to him, and he is the seventh. Those, they say, are like the heavens and the earths and the seas, and the days of the week, and the planets which govern with the engagement and enters into clientship with the Imam. Like that. And the planets which govern with a command. The Babakiyah, inasmuch as a party among them follow Babek el-Kursani in respect to going out clad in the mantle of Yemen and in red, because they wore red in the days of Babek, or because they were like those who differed from them of the Muslimin in respect to the mantle. Now, it's not the color red or purple or yellow or orange. It's the method of dyeing that Islam actually forbids, but certain traditions have arisen. The Ismâ'ilîyeh, on account of their affirming the imamship as the right of Ismail ibn Ja'far as-Sadiq, who was the eldest of Ja'far's sons, or as some say, on account of the derivation of their heterodoxy from Muhammad ibn Ismail, the root from which their preaching of the abrogation of the laws grew up was the Qabadiyah, a sect of the Magians, who being goaded by Islam aimed to allegorize the laws in certain ways, coming back to the principles of their forefathers. That is to say, they assembled and reminded one another of the position of undivided rule which their forefathers held, and said, there is no way for us to eject the Muslimin by the sword on account of their superiority and their possession of the seats of empire, but let us use stratagem by allegorizing their laws with a view to coming back to our principles, leading on by degrees the weak among them, so that they will necessitate their being at variance with one another, and the shaking of their system. And their head in respect to that was Hamdan of Barmat, or some say Abdullah ibn Maymun al-Qadah. And in calling, see, so there's always been plots to produce sectarianism against the Muslimin. It didn't even start with colonialism, see? And in calling and leading on men, they have degrees of fitness, which comprehends the judging by the countenance of the state of the person called, whether he is favorable to the call or not, and the saying, thou wilt make excuse for the putting of the germ into the trunk, that is, for the call of one not favorable, who is in accordance with that, and they refuse to dispute in a house where there is a lamp, that is, in a place where there is a doctor of the law, or a metaphysician, and then familiarizing oneself with the inclination of every one of those called with which he inclines to, as respects to his desire, his native bent pertaining to withdrawment from the world and free living, and so if he inclines to withdrawment from the world and is set off in fair colors before him, and its opposite is depreciated, and if he inclines to free living that is set off in fair colors before him, and its opposite is depreciation, until the man thereby is granted, and then causing to doubt in respect to the cornerstones of the law and the abbreviations of the Suwar, the chapters of the Quran, and that one says, what is the meaning of the isolated letters in the beginnings of the Suwar? There's 29 that have that, and there are 30 verses for that. And of the statute requiring women in her menses to fast without a statute requiring her to pray, that is, why is one needful and not the other? Making up the fast, as Islam obliges, but not making up the prayer. And of the necessity of ablution on account of seminal discharge and not of the urine, well, because one's keep away from, the other's unclean. And well, ablution for both, but full bath for the one. And of the number of the prostrations in prayer, that is, why are they in some cases 3 and in some cases 2, and so on to things remote from these, and the reason why they thus render them doubtful and cause to inquire. The answer in regard to these things is that they may be inquired of on their return respecting them, and then the confirmation, which includes 2 things, namely, first, the receiving of the engagement from the candidate, and that they say that God's sunnah has added currency by the receiving of engagements and pledges and allegiance. In proof of that, he is saying, let him be exalted. And when we receive from the prophets their engagements, and then receive it with receiving his engagement made in accordance with a firm belief on his part that no secret thing is hidden from them, and second, the obliging him in behalf of the Imam with respect to the clearing up of that which he is confused about, of the things which one presents to him, because it is he who knows them, and the candidate has no command of them until he alleviates himself to something of the degree which pertains to him, and comes to the Imam, and then the imposition, which is the pretension of agreement with them on part of the great religious and worldly affairs, so that the candidate may be more in favor of that to which one calls him, and then the putting of a foundation, which is the arrangement of premises to which he who is called is favorable, and which he grants, which point him to that false doctrine to which one calls him, and then the divestiture, which is the causing to rest in the neglect of corporeal actions, and then the despoiling of the firm beliefs of religion. And when an affair of calling has gone so far, they set about to abrogate prohibitions and to incite the indulgence in pleasures, and allegorize the laws, agreeably to their sayings, that a partial washing signifies friendship to the Imam, and as for the entire washing, that is the receiving by hearsay from the madhun when the Imam is hidden, what prayer is, and that prayer signifies the natak, who is the envoy, and is proved by his saying, let him be exalted. Prayer is the means, so that's understandable to a degree, but you know what they're implying. But the verily prayer restrains from depravity and crime, and that the having nocturnal pollution, well, Islam doesn't call it pollution. Emissions signifies the divulging of one of their secrets to one who is not of the people to whom it belongs, without any object in doing so. And the abolition of the whole body, the renewal of the pledge, the almsgiving, the purification of the soul by knowledge of the religion which they profess, and the Kaaba, the Prophet, the gate, Ali and Asafa, Ali and Al-Marwa, the Prophet, and the place of rendezvous of pilgrims, the familiarizing, the ending, the responding to the call and the circling of the house 7 times, friendship to the 7 Imams and the garden, the repose of bodies from duty, and the fire, the severity of toil and duty, and so on to other writings. And their doctrine is that God is not existent nor non-existent, neither knowing nor ignorant, neither powerful nor weak, and so on, as to all the attributes, and that because spiritual affirmation requires the association of him with things existent, which is an anthropomorphism. Well, we know these qualities through creation, but the creation is not God. Well, absolute denial requires the association of him with things non-existent, which is a making void. But that, on the contrary, he is necessarily possessed of these attributes and the Lord of contraries. And often they blend their system with the system of the philosophers. And accordingly say they that let him be exalted, produced by his Amir, the perfect intelligence, and that by means of that which was the product of the soul, which is not perfect, and so that the soul yearns after perfect intelligence, seeking to be quickened by it, and consequently that there is a requiring of motion from incompleteness to completion, and the motion is perfected only through the soul's restlessness, and so the bodies of the celestial spheres originate and move with a circular movement as governed by the soul, and so that by means of them originate the simple elementary natural properties, and that by means of the simples originate the composites, namely minerals and plants and species of animals, and that the most excellent of them is man, on account of his preparedness for the infusion upon him of the lights of the Holy One, and his connection with the higher world, and that is, as the higher world contains a perfect universal intelligence and an imperfect universal soul, which is the source of all beings, so that there is in the lower world a perfection of intelligence, which is a means of deliverance by likeness and it to the relation of the primitive soul to the primitive intelligence in what relates to the causing of beings to exist, that is, the Imam, who is a natik, like a T, and that as the celestial spheres move, as moved by the intelligence and the soul, in like manner living souls move to deliverance, as moved by the natik and the legati, that it is so in every age and period. Says al-Ahmadi, such were the opinions of some senseless person, and when al-Hasan ibn Muhammad as-Sabah appeared, he exerted himself, and the call assumed that he was the Hujjah, who relieves the Imam, who no period may be without, and the sum of this system was that which took the precedence respecting the need of the teacher. Moreover, he prohibited common people from the meddling with the sciences, and people of note from looking into the ancient books, lest their disgraces be exposed, and afterward they became philosophers and ceased not to make sport of the canons of religious ordinances and legal commands, and they entrenched themselves in fortresses and made their power increased. And any kings whose visors were of their party feared calamity, for they made a show of neglecting duties and openly desecrated sacred things and became like brute beasts without any religious control or legal restraint. Says the author, respecting the Tatar Khania in the year 577, the doctors of law of Samarkand were asked respecting a man who makes a show of Islam and prays and fasts and makes a show of the profession of unity and belief in Muhammad, let peace be to him, for many years and afterwards confess, saying, as for me, I have been during these past years a firm believer according to the doctrine of the Paramatta, and as I've been to Da'eh to men, and now I am a convert and returned to Islam and makes now a show of that which he before made a show of pertaining to the religion of Islam, only that he is suspected to hold the doctrine of Paramatta as if he were among them. What the sentence is as to his blood and his property and his effects on the occasion of his exposing himself and his confession is that he has been found out, and it were idle until he confess his doctrine to put him to death. Abd al-Karim ibn Muhammad said, the putting to death of the Paramatta universally is a necessary thing, and their being treated without discrimination a statue, because they are veritably apostate unbelievers, and their influence to corrupt the religion of Islam is greater than any other, and the injury to which they do the greatest of injuries. Abu Hassan Muhammad Sa'id said, it may be said of this man, of whom mention is made as Abu Hanifa, that God be merciful to him, is related to have said respecting a Qadri, who said in the present, that's a type of Sufi, right? Who said in the presence of Abu Hanifa, sorry about the furniture, I am a convert. Abu Hanifa, namely, let God be merciful to him, said, conversion on thy part is that thou returnest to all whom thou hast led astray and callest them to the truth, and sayest, as for me, I have been holding falsehood. And Abu Qasim and Abdul Rahman ibn al-Hussein as-Safar, with regard of the like of those, namely the Karmata, whenever we cause them to be found out, the obligation rests upon the Sultan for the first instance, and upon the doctors of the law of the Muslimin in the second instance, to set down their account, to put them to death, to eradicate them, not admitting on their part either conversion or apology. And Abu Muhammad Abdul Karim ibn Muhammad said, as for all who act openly of the Qarmata, let God abandon them as firm believers according to their doctrine and become da'is of men to it. They are not after that sincere in their pretension of conversion and return to Islam because they are not truly converted and make a show on their part of that which they make a show of only after the manner of piety for the safety of themselves and their property and their families and their children are something thereof. For a certain one said, methinks that to pray which profits not is advantageous among imams. Oh, what's the plural of imams? I should know that. Because Arabic doesn't have S at the end, it's their plural. Neither does Farsi or any other. Well, I guess maybe some language does. And he was one of the party of the impious, to which his people said, O my preceptor, what avails this assiduity while we acknowledge the faith? Whereupon he said, it is on account of the custom of the country and for the protection of the family and the children. So then if we were to admit on their part which they pretend of conversion. They would make that turn out to the overflow of Islam and the laws, and the injury of the Muslimin would be greater than that which happens to them of the injury from those with whom they are at war. And accordingly, one of our men tells us that the doctors of the law in Balkh have decided in favor of shedding the blood of the Qarmata and burning up their houses. Well, Islam itself doesn't allow going after people or their houses of worship or their property just because they believe something different. And after they've declared themselves of their opinion, and so some of them were beaten with thongs, you know, straps like for sandals and stuff, and afterwards put to death. And Abu Salama, Muhammad ibn Dawood Ashafi said, whoever brutes this vile doctrine and makes a show on his part of the call to it, let not any conversation be omitted on his part, but on the contrary, let him be put to death. And Abu Sa'id al-Istakri, one of our men, was of this opinion. He said, some of our men have distinguished that which marks the apostate and the follower of Qarmat with respect to conversion, and the followers of Qarmat is an apostate. He lets go the manifest sense of words and calls up their hidden sense. And so, when he with his tongue makes a show of conversion on his part, it may be that together with that he declares something hidden, which he pretends, as his tongue happens to express it, after the manner of piety, and he gives out that he is already converted, so that his being a Muslim may not be judged of. And as for the apostate, other than the follower of Qarmat, because he calls not up the hidden sense of words, and as the follower of Qarmat does, he was a Muslim originally. Whatever he professes Islam, whenever he professes it, he returns, and we know that he is converted. Verily, let him be exalted, says. So then, what shall be the portion of those who fight against God and his envoy, and exert themselves to corrupt the earth, etc., which is directed against those who exert themselves to corrupt the earth? But religion is worthier and prior, because that which religion enjoins is of more moment to be cared for than the earth, in every respect and prior to it. The above in brief is what was said, and an inquiry was proposed to the Sheikh al-Islam, the seal of profound investigators, the party of Hanbal, Taqi ad-Din ibn Itmiyah, the form of which was as follows. What say the learned ignores the bonds of religion? Let God be gracious to them all, to aid them to manifest the plain truth and to cover the fair show of errorists respecting the Ismâ'ilîyeh, who declare the lawfulness of wine and the transmigration of spirits and the eternity of the world, and profess to deny the awakening and the gathering and the resurrection and the garden and the fire. You know, the garden and fire, the hereafter. Not the same thing as gardens and fire here. In another than life, which is of this world, and declare that the 5 prayers signify 5 names, which are Ali and Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein and Muhsin and Fatima, so that the mentioning of these 5 suffices them, in place of the ablution of the whole body on account of sexual intercourse, and the partial washing and other conditions of prayer and its essentials, and that fasting in their opinion signifies 3 men, and is the name of 3 women, all of whom they enumerate in their books, to mention whom particularly there is no room here, and that their deity, who created the heavens and the earth, is Ali ibn Abu Talib. Let God be gracious to him. Well, there are, what's the name of the one group in particular that actually very specifically claims that? But let God be gracious to him, regardless of what people have exaggerated. Hence, so that he, in the opinion is the deity in heaven and the bomb on earth, and the philosophy which maintains the manifestation of the deity in this humanity is based upon their view that he enters into familiarity with his creatures in order that he may teach them how they may know him and serve him, and that the Nusayri become not, in their opinion, a believing Nusayri, whom they will sit with and in company with, whom they will drink and whom they will let into their secrets, and whom and to whom they will give in marriage of their women, until his teacher addresses him. On the substance of the address, in their opinion, is that they make him swear to the concealment of his religion and the knowledge of his elders and the great ones among the people of his doctrine, and that he will consult no Muslim nor any others excepting those who are of the people of his religion, and that he acknowledges his Imam and his Lord as manifested in his revolutions and his periods, and so acknowledges the transmission of the Ism and the Ma'na in every epoch and age. And the Ism, the name, what's the other one? In their opinion, among the first of men was Adam, and the Mana, Shait, and the Ism, Yaqub, to mean Shaitan, right? And the Mana, Yusuf. Okay, maybe they mean like Seth or something. Yusuf's Joseph. And they used to prove this representation as they think, which is in Al-Quran, namely a story about Yaqub and Yusuf, let peace be upon them both, and accordingly say, what is Yaqub? And as for him, he was the Ism, for which power exceeds his station. He says, presently I will ask pardon for you of my Lord, verily he is the pardoner, the compassionate. As for Yusuf, he was the Mana, who said, who was asked, and so he says, there is no reprimanding of you this day. God pardons you and brings not in the authority of another, because he knows that he is absolute deity. God is absolute deity, not Joseph or anything. And they lay it down that Musa was the Ism and Yeshua the Mana. And they say for Yeshua, the son yielded to him after he had commanded it and obeyed his command. And does the son yield to anyone except his Lord? Is their argument. Well, God allows miracles to be worked through prophets and forces of nature. It doesn't mean that these things are, our Lord or something. Spiritual master, maybe, and they lay it down that Solomon was the Ism and the Asaf, and Asaf the Mana, and say Solomon was impotent to cause to be in presence of the throne of Balqis, and Asaf had the power to do it because Solomon was the Ism and the Asaf was the Mana, the potent, the powerful. And they enumerate the prophets and the messengers one by one after the manner of this talk, up to the time of the envoy of God, the international age, Muhammad, but Abdullah, the prophet, with the Quran came through. Let the divine benediction and peace be upon him. So they say that Muhammad was the Ism and Ali the Ma'na, and they carry on the enumeration in this order through every age up to our time. So much for this. But it is a part of the substance of religion and the address and their opinions that instruction be given that Ali is the Lord and Muhammad the veil and Solomon the gate, and that these in this order have not ceased and will not cease to be, and to the rhyming which is famous among them of some of their extravagances belongs the saying of one, the accursed, the disbeliever in God, let him be exalted. I testify that there is no deity except the lion with the bald temples and big belly, and no veil to him except Muhammad, the just, the faithful, and no way to him except Solomon, the possessor of power, the steadfast. Yeah. Sounds like something that takes a person out of Islam. But they think they're continuing the path. That's the point being brought about here. And in like manner, there are the 5 solitaries and the 12 naqibs, and whose names are made known according to them in their detestable books, for they cease not to proclaim the Lord, the veil, and the gate, in every revolution and period, forever without end. Also the Iblis of the Iblises, there's a plural of that, was Omar ibn al-Khattab, that God be gracious to him, and then the next in rank of the Iblises was Abu Bakr, and then Uthman. Well, can you find anybody, despite problems with Umar and Uthman more than Abu Bakr, but anybody in the past 1,000 years that's been as good of a leader as any of them in the overall sense? Maybe they had more numbers of one thing or another, but numbers based on the numbers that they were in charge, that they had direction over, or whatever, Like God be gracious to them and clear them and elevate their rank above the saying of the heretics and the profession of the self-devoting extravagance, and they cease not at any time to exist according to what they tell. Now, Sunnis among them are people who exaggerate the position of those 3 in particular, but they don't. But it's not to the point of treating them as gods. And there are ramifications and subdivisions to their doctrines which come back to these fundamental principles mentioned. And this accursed sect has possessed itself of a great part of the country of Syria, and so that they are known, noted, and declared themselves as holding this doctrine. And all who have had intercourse with them, and by intercourse, I'm sure they mean communication with them, of the government agents, of the Muslimin and their learned men, of the common people, also to the present time have verified the state of the cause in respect to them, for during the time that the heretic Franks held possession of the country, it was unknown to many how it stood with them. But after the days of Islam came, the state of the case in respect to them was discovered, and their departure from the right way was manifested, and the proof of them was very abundant. And some people say, well, because the some people look at the Yazidi and act like they're not really a offshoot of Islam or something. They, some people use terms that could have been influenced by the Sufis and stuff like this, but it doesn't. It's clear it's not even Sufism. And you can also tie that to back thing, but often people look at turbans and sort of clothing that people maybe wore in hot weather. Or maybe you have something that can go from very hot weather to very cold weather, like some of the Hyperborean people would have wanted to be over, right into places where maybe it got 120 or so, and places where it got below 0, so they had clothing that would provide for both those things, and they wouldn't have to carry multiple types of clothing, So then it is allowed to the Muslimin to take, it is allowed to a Muslim to take a wife from among them, and is the eating of their sacrifices permitted, while the state of the case is such. Is it? And what is the sentence in respect to the cheese made from the curdled milk of one of their animals offered in sacrifice? And what is the sentence in respect to their vessels and their garments also? And is the burying them among the Muslimin allowed or not? And is it allowed to employ any of them on the frontiers of the Muslimin and to entrust to them? Or on the other hand, is it obligatory upon the prefect of command to displace them and employ other men of the trusty Muslimin? And does he do wrong when he commands to turn them off and employ others than them? Or, on the other hand, is he allowed to him great delay, in this case determined upon when he employs them and afterwards displaces them, or does not displace them, and is allowed to him to invest the monies of the public treasury on their responsibility, and is the shedding of the blood of the said Nusaria lawful, and their property a thing decided upon as free to be taken or not. And when the prefect of command makes war upon them, does God, let them be exalted, aid him in the extinction of their false doctrine and the ejection of them from the fortresses of the Muslimin, and of the warring of the people of Islam against intermarrying with them, and the eating their sacrifices, and the commanding of them to fast and pray, and the preventing of them from making a show of their false religion. And is he who wars with the said Nusaria counted as one who mounts a cavalier, and is his recompense like the recompense of him who mounts a cavalier on the frontiers on the shore of the sea through fear of an invasion from the Franks? Or has this one a greater recompense? And it is obligatory upon anyone who knows the said persons and their doctrines to divulge what they are, and to help to do away with their false doctrine and the proclaiming of the Imam on their part, so that God, let him be exalted, may perhaps regard their offspring and their children as Muslimin. Or on the other hand, is it allowed to him to be unconcerned and to let things take their course? And what is the recompense of him who labors assiduously for that and is zealous for it and intent upon it? Had they spoken explicitly regarding these things as assisted and aided and recompensed, if God, let him be exalted, wills, the answer respecting this in the handwriting of the Sheikh Taqi ad-Din ibn Itmiya, may God, let him be exalted, be merciful to him, was as follows: as for these people denominated the Nusaria, they and other classes of the mystical Gurmata are more unbelieving than the Jews and the Christians, nay, more unbelieving than many idolaters, and the injury which they do to the community of Muhammad, let the divine benediction and peace be to him, is greater than the injury done by warring infidels. Islam itself doesn't use words like infidel, pagan, Gentile, heathen. Those aren't proper translations of mushrik or kafir, such as of the Turks and the Franks and others. For these meet the warring of the Muslimin by affecting to be Shia, while in reality to believe not in God, nor in his envoy, nor in his book, nor in any command, nor in any prohibition, nor in any reward, nor in any penalty, nor in any garden, nor in any fire. Well, perhaps some, just not enough to be more than influenced by Islam. Nor in any one of the messengers preceding our Prophet Muhammad, let the divine benediction and peace be to him, nor in any of the former religions, nay, they take up the word of God and his envoy acknowledged among the Muslimin to allegorize it agreeably to certain things which they are full of, pretending that they constitute the science of the hidden sense, such as those mentioned by the inquirer, and others not of this sort. For as for them, they have no set limit as to that which they pretend of heresy, respecting the names of the Creator and his signs, and of the perversion of the word of God, let him be exalted, and the word of his envoy, to the doing away of its positions, inasmuch as their intention is to deny the faith and the laws of Islam altogether, while at the same time they hold out that these things have the realities known to them, which are such sort of things as the inquirer has mentioned, and such as they're saying that the 5 prayers are the knowledge of their secrets, and the prescribed fasting, and the concealment of their secrets, and the pilgrimage to the ancient house, and the visiting of their sheikhs, and that the 2 hands of Abu Lahab were Abu Bakr and Umar, let God be gracious to them both, and that the great prophet and the evident Imam was Ali ibn Abu Talib, let God be gracious to him. The exaggeration that Ali was like the new prophet or something, that's actually much more common. They are the authors of some well-known charges and some books composed in hostility to Islam and its people, and so whenever it is in their power, they shed the blood of the Muslimin, as they put to death once upon a time the pilgrims to Mecca and cast them into Zamzam, and once upon a time took off the black stone. Notice the Baramites. which remained with them a long while. Wasn't it like 30 years or something? When was this? And put to death a multitude, which only God, let him be exalted, can compute, of the learned men of the Muslimin, and their elders, and their princes, and their troops. And it is said that they composed many books, and that which, what the Inquirer mentions, is them, and other things. And the learned men of the Muslimin have composed books disclosing their secrets, and have therein made evident their misbelieving, the Zindiqism, and the heresy which they profess, inasmuch as they are herein more unbelieving than the Jews or the Christians are than those who worship idols. I don't think you can say that far, but more of a risk towards unbelief, because it's presented like it's like the inner side of Islam or something, you know. And as for that which the Inquirer has mentioned, by way of describing them, is a little out of the mulch of that which is known to learned men, as descriptive of them, and that it is, among other things known among them, that the Christians possess themselves of the sea coasts of Syria only by means of them, who are always in league with every enemy to the Muslimin, and who were so leagued with the Christians against the Muslimin. One of the greatest calamities, in their opinion, was the Muslimin coming off superior over the Tatars. And one of the greatest of their rejoicings was when the Christians, and reverse is God's appointment, possessed themselves of the frontiers of the Muslimin, which ceased not to be under the power of the Muslimin, as far as the land of Cyprus, conquered by the Muslimin and the Caliphate, the prince of the believers, Uthman ibn Affan, that God be gracious to him, which Muawiyah, the son of Abu Sufyan, that God be gracious to them both, conquered up to the middle of the 4th century, when these combatants against God and his envoy multiplied on the seacoast and elsewhere. And so the Christians possessed themselves of the seaboard, and afterwards, owing to them, possessed themselves of the holy city and other places, for the circumstances of the case as respected them were among the most potent occasions thereof, after which, when God had raised up kings of the Muslimin who warred in the way of God, such as Nur ad-Din, the martyr, and Salah ad-Din, and their successors, and they had conquered the seacoast from the Christians and those who were in league with them, and had also conquered the land of Egypt and held possession of them about 200 years, and were at peace with them and the Christians, for until they had conquered the country, the Muslimin made war upon them, and within that period the call of Islam was published in the country of Egypt and in that of Syria. And they have certain appellations affixed to them among the Muslimin. Sometimes they are called the Mallah, and sometimes they are called the Kramata, and sometimes they are called the Nashia, and sometimes they are called the Ismâ'ilîyeh, and sometimes they're called the Haramiyah, and sometimes they're called the Muhammara. And as for these names, some of them belong to them in common, some of them are peculiar to some of their classes, just as the name form from the 4th conjunction Salama, and that form from the 4th conjunction of Amana belongs to the Muslimin in common, while some of them have names peculiar to them, either by parentage or by country or on account of something else. And he, Ibn Yatmiyah, comments upon their purposes at some length as follows. So then they consist of those who are outwardly Rafidda. So Rafidda is the rejectors, the ones who exaggerate the station of Ali and some others. And inwardly pure infidels. So the people who were enemies of Ali were disbelievers at that time. And Sunni narrations have that 3 things. And the people that were of his party, though, they were the believers, the mu'min. And the truth of the matter in respect to them is that they believe not in any one of the books and the messengers, neither in Nuh, nor in Ibrahim, nor in Musa, nor in Isa, nor in Muhammad. Let the divine benediction and peace be to him, nor well, all of them, nor in any of the books of God sent down from above, neither in the law, nor in the gospel, nor in the Psalms, nor in the distinguisher. And by that we mean the originals, not necessarily with the Jews and the Christians and the people of other paths, forgotten and known about, claim about those scriptures, or those types of scriptures, you could say. And they do not maintain that the world had a creator who created it, nor that there's any religion of his which he commands, nor that he is proved with any state of being in which he recompenses men for their actions, other than the present state. And sometimes they base their profession of belief in accordance with the doctrines of the philosophers, naturalistic or deistic, upon that of the Mutakashpa and that of the Magians who worship fire. No, they don't. No Zoroastrian has ever worshipped fire. There are polytheists among them, but they don't worship the fire. That's a lie that the Greeks and stuff started, and other people picked it up. So when Ismâ'ilîyeh started being corrupted, started accepting beliefs of Greeks over the revealed beliefs, then, well, I mean, Greeks had prophets come to them too, right? But you know what I mean. They repeated that claim about these people. And to that add a mingling of Rapidism and falsified reporting, for instance, as their tradition handled down from the prophet, let the divine benediction and peace be to him, that he said the first thing that God created was the intelligence, and he said to it, approach, and it approached, and he said to it, retire, and it retired, and perverting the prophet's expression to such a degree that one of them writes, the name of God, let him be exalted, on the lower part of his legs, and they deny what the prophets have communicated. Aleister Crowley even related the story of how somebody that people said had the name of God written on their foot, so that's why they didn't help him out when he needed help. And Crowley think that this person probably did no such thing. People just spread rumors and excuse. And they deny what the prophets have communicated. Now, sometimes there's a denial of what the prophets communicated, and sometimes there's a denial of what is claimed that the prophets communicated. That's not always the same thing. And the learned men, the Muslimin, are already agreed that, as for such as these, intermarriage with them is not allowed, so that a man may not use one of them as his concubine. Concubine meaning like a secondary wife or something. Nor take one of them as his wife. Oh, well, I guess maybe not. Maybe that is some interest. But wait, if that's intermarriage, and we're having different words for wife, aren't we? Because in the Bible, it makes it sound like, oh, this guy took a mistress, and this guy, no, they were all wives. But in English, the English people want to play games to make it sound like one, to support the Christian doctrine for the bishops. For if the bishops have to only marry one wife, then everybody should be required that. And oh, wait, but no, now the bishops are pretending to be celibate now, everybody, And that their sacrifices not to be partaken of. And as for the cheese made from the curdled milk, learned men say two things which are well known respecting it. And as respecting to other curdled milk of dead animals, and the curdled milk of the Magians, and the curdled milk of the Franks, of whom it is said that they do not slay victims for sacrifice. The doctrine then is of Abu Hanifa, may God be gracious to him, and I give praise in making one of the two citations, is that cheese is allowed because the curdled milk becomes not dead with the death of the beast, and the impure receptacle in the belly affects it not with a pollution. And the doctrine of Malik and Ashafi, and I give praise in making the other citation, is that this cheese is impure because, in their opinion, the curdled milk is impure for the milk of the dead animal, and its curdled milk are, in their opinion, impure, and whoever whomsoever the sacrifices may not be partakers of his sacrifice is like a dead animal. And as for their vessels and the garments, they are the like of the vessels of the Magians, and the garments of the Magians, according to what is known of the doctrines of the Imams, the Sahih, the Sunni books, the 6 big ones. One of which is now fully available in English, by the way, and never has been done before. It was only partially available, which is because the main tradition of passing it on left parts out that were still available in Arabic. Interestingly enough, says that their vessels should not be used except that they have been washed for their sacrifices or dead animals, and so of necessity, if any part of what they cook of their sacrifices reaches those of their vessels which are made use of, they are thereby polluted. But as for the vessels which one is not obliged to regard as rendered impure, they may be used without any washing, such as vessels for milk, in which they leave not their bouillons, and which they wash before putting milk into them. And Umar, God be gracious to him, indeed performed his ablutions with the jar of a Christian woman, respecting the impurity of which he doubted, so that he did not judge it to be impure by doubting, and is not allowed to bury them in the burial places of the Muslimin, nor to pronounce the benediction upon any of them who die. For God, let him be exalted, forbade his prophet, let the divine benediction and peace be to him, to renounce the benediction upon hypocrites, such as Ubaydullah ibn Ubay and those about him, who made a show of praying and almsgiving and fasting and warring on the side of the Muslimin, and not making openly any declaration which is at variance with the religion of the Muslimin, but keeping such difference secret. Says God, let him be exalted, and thou mayest not pronounce the benedictions upon any one of them who dies ever, that thou mayest preside over his burial. Verily, they disbelieve in God and his envoy, and die as wicked persons. How shall it be then with these, who together with Zendikism and hypocrisy make a show of infidelity and heresy? And as for the employing of such as these on the frontiers of the Muslimin and in their fortresses or among their troops, that is a great error, equal to one's employing wolves to pasture sheep, for they are the most treacherous of men toward the Muslimin. Well, the Awliya are among that group too, and the prefix of their commands, and the most eager of men for the corruption of religion of Islam and the empire of Muhammad. And they are worse than the lurker about in the army, for as for him who lurks about, he has an aim which concerns either the commander of the armies or the enemy, which while their aims concerning our religion and its prophet and its rights and its kings and its learned men and its common people and its people of note, and they are the most eager of men to entrust the fortresses of the enemies of the Muslimin, and to alienate the troops from the perfect of command, and to withdraw them from obedience to him. So then it is obligatory upon the prefects of command to displace them from the roles of fighting men, whether in a fortress or elsewhere than in the fortress, while the harm they do in the fortress is most serious, and that they employ instead of them believing men who hold to the religion of Islam and the admonition of God as envoy and imams of the Muslimin. And when they make a show of conversion, respecting that there is a dispute among learned men, so then those who admit their conversion bind them to the observance of the law of Islam and impose on them the tribute of their effects. And those who admit it not, rejecting their ranking as of their class, so that whatever of theirs reverts to the public treasury. But as for these, whenever they are taken up, they make a show of conversion, inasmuch as one accommodates his doctrine to piety, and the hiding of what is the case with them. And there are those among them who are acquainted with their religion, and those who are not so that the way respecting that is to look out for what is the case with them, and that they be not suffered to congregate, and that they be not empowered to bear arms, not even if they make a part of the fighting men, and that they be bound to the observance of the laws of Islam, namely the 5 prayers and the reading of the Quran, and that some one stay among them, and may teach them the religion of Islam, and interpose between them and their teachers, and let them be prohibited from making a part of the cavalry, and of the bearers of arms, and those of clad in the coats of mail which the fighting men wear, and that they may not stay among the troops, just as neither a Jew nor a Christian may stay among the troops, and let them be bound to the observance of the laws of Islam. It is not allowable to anyone to leave them at the extremity of the frontiers. Now, if you read the Bible, you're going to see some of the reason why the Jews and the Christians shouldn't be allowed in the army, because of their lack of ethic, as in the killing of non-combatants is biblical, which when you're fighting for justice and in defense of people, that's at least going to mar things by having people like that among you. This is according to that which God, let him be exalted, says, namely, do ye regard the giving of water to the pilgrim to Mecca, and the visiting of the mosque, as ye regard one's believing in God and the day which is to come, and the warring on the side of God. Is it the warring or is it the striving? Is the words broader than warring? They are not alike in God's estimation, and God directs not wicked people. Those who believe and leave their homes and war on the side of God, staking their effects and their lives, are highest in degree in God's esteem, and as for those, they are those who are saved. Their Lord announces to them the gladness of mercy from him and grace, and there are gardens for them in which is enduring pleasure, where they shall abide forever. With God is great recompense, and God, glory be to him, is the knowing one. And Surah 52, 13 speaks of a wall separating the 57:13, the wall separating the believers from the hypocrites. And the missionaries are called the gates, which the Baha'i movement exaggerated that position. And there are other things alluded to here. Oh, that's interesting. Revelation 19:16. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So is that what these people were mimicking when they wrote stuff on their legs? I might write something on myself to remind myself of something. Some women will write their name and number on you.